Hey, friends, this is your host, Rodrigo, and this is the Dapr in Action series. And today we're going to see the configuration building block, which is a component, of course, just like the other ones, right? For obtaining configuration in a centralized way, which is fantastic, right? Otherwise, how can you manage your configuration settings in your applications? Maybe you're using, I don't know, if you happen to be a .NET developer, maybe you're using the configuration providers, right? At least, uh, please don't hard code your configuration settings in your code, right? So, yeah, with this component, we can centralize those settings and easily manage and retrieve those settings. So that's what we're gonna see today. And let's jump right in. So there are some configuration stores nowadays that we can use. In this session, I'm going to use the Azure App Configuration Provider. And, because I happen to have an Azure account, right? And I already deployed an app service. But you can also use Redis, and you can use also others. In this case, I'm going to use app configuration from Azure. And of course, the um, main point here is that the sidecar is the one that is going to connect to the configuration store. And your application uses the Dapr sidecar for retrieving the configuration settings and also for subscribing and unsubscribing from those settings. In other words, you can subscribe to changes and updates in the configuration settings, which is fantastic for those applications that are being changed constantly, right? So this is great. And the configuration itself is based on key value pairs. So you don't need anything else most of the time. You just store the value with a key and that's it, right? And then you retrieve that value using the key. And as I mentioned before, subscribe and unsubscribe to and from those configuration updates. So Azure App Configuration is there since runtime version 1.9, as you can see here on the screen. But you can also use PostgreSQL or PostgreSQL. I don't know how you pronounce that. I pronounce it PostgreSQL. Anyway, maybe I'm wrong. And you can also use Redis. And I think with those three options, you are covered, right? So take into account those statuses. I mean, PostgreSQL and Redis, those are stable components. And meanwhile, the Azure App Configuration component is an alpha. It's in an alpha state. But I've used Azure App Configuration in the past, this component, and it works perfectly. And that's the one I'm going to use in this session. If you are interested in knowing some other information about the configuration component, of course, you can go ahead and navigate to dapr.io. And just like we do most of the time, you can go ahead and search for the component. So building blocks, not the component itself, configuration, and you can read the entire information about it here in the web page. And if you happen to be using a regular HTTP request and you are using those kind of interactions by using an HTTP request and receiving the response, then you should know that the API is in the configuration endpoint. But I've mentioned this before in the past. I don't think this is a real world situation. Most of the time, if you have an SDK for your platform, this is the development platform, then that is totally recommended instead of just using HTTP request. So I'm sorry about that. Oh my God, I wasn't sharing. Anyway, the explanation is there. The explanation is there. You can use the configuration store. I'm sorry. Anyway, the explanation is there. I didn't need the visuals in this case. Thank you, my good friend Simon. He's always checking things out, and I was wrong. I wasn't sharing my screen. Sorry about that. Anyway, Dapr sidecar, you connect to the configuration store. You can also subscribe and unsubscribe to those updates based on key value pairs, and that is it. So this is the place where I was mentioning the configuration stores. Azure App Configurations is in the alpha status, and PostgreSQL and Redis, those two are in the stable phase. And the endpoint is configuration. That's it. So nothing happened, okay? Let's move on. Let's create a new web API. Let's name it configuration. Let's use controllers, right? Just a regular web API. So I have the configuration folder here, and let's create a resources folder. In this place, I want to create the component itself. Remember that those components are YAML files. So I need to create the YAML file here. What kind of YAML file? Well, let's navigate to configuration stores and then Azure App Configuration, right? And this is the component format for Azure App Configuration. This is the one that I'm going to use in this video. As you can see, the type is configuration.azure.appconfig. And of course, you have API version, kind, metadata, and spec, and the name of the metadata is the one that is going to use in the code, and the kind is component, just like we've done this in the past. Okay, so let's move on. Let's jump right in here. And let's also create .NET new solution, .NET solution add, and we're ready to rumble. Configuration.solution. And of course, I'm going to use Visual Studio 2022 since this is fantastic. And let's see what's going on here. I have the project. I have the weather forecast controller thing and the weather forecast model. And I actually need to add the SDK, just like any other regular Dapr application that is using ASP.NET Core. So this is the one that I'm going to reference at the time of this recording. The latest one is 1.14. 1.15 is coming in the following weeks. Anyway, let's go to the program file, add controllers, add Dapr, and that's it. I Dapperized this application already. So here, I want to reuse the weather forecast controller. So I want to store those summaries as a configuration setting. Instead of using those hard-coded values, I just can go ahead, create a configuration setting, and read that configuration from Azure App Configuration, right? So let me jump to the portal. So I'm going to log in this other monitor that I have here. And yes, I want to sign in this other place. I'm not showing anything because the portal is in this other place. So bear with me. Dapr in action, and this is it, right? This is it. So I want to navigate to the Dapr in action resource that I have here. You should be watching my screen. Yes. So Azure app configuration. Sorry about that. So configuration explorer, you can see that I created this summaries setting. And if I edit this value, you can see that it has freezing, bracing, chilly, cool, mild, and so on. So this is a regular JSON array, and this is the setting that I want to read by using Dapr. Okay, so let's move on. I want to remove this. Let's use the primary constructor syntax, and let's actually remove everything since I want to read those summaries from the settings. So Dapr client, of course, I want to inject the client. Let's wrap this Dapr client, and then Dapr client. Let's see what we have here. Get configuration. So this is the one. So I need to pass, this is a task. This is returning a task. So this has to return task. Let's change it to action result. And of course, I need to await this. And I also need the store name. I haven't created the component itself. So let's do that right away. Let's go back here in resources. Let's create a new YAML file. So for instance, notepad configuration.yaml. Okay, configuration.yaml, that is right here in this other screen. So let's go back to the documentation. So I'm going to copy this. And you can also see that the only thing that is needed is the connection string itself. So I need the connection string from my Azure portal that is right here in the access settings option. And I'm going to copy this connection string, and I'm going to use that for specifying that setting. So let's go ahead and paste everything. Let's delete everything, and let's use the value host. I don't think we need host. We only need the connection string. The name is going to be, let's name it configuration. I'm going to increase the font size. Configuration, the type is configuration.azure.appconfig, and the connection string is going to be the one that I happen to have right here. Let me go ahead and paste the value that is right here. Okay, so this is the connection string. I think that's it. That is it. So the name is configuration. That's the one that I need to pass to the get configuration method. So configuration. And I also need to pass this I read only list of strings. So the name is summaries. If you happen to have different different configuration settings, you can pass those here, right? X, Y, Z. But of course, I only have summaries, so I think this syntax is acceptable. You should also pass metadata. In this case, I think we first need to test this out right in this way. So let's see what's going on here. Get configuration, await operator, async. Of course, this needs to be async. And we can also read the configuration in this way. So for instance, I want to obtain the configuration and then, I don't know, use it somehow. Configuration or summaries. It's going to be this, and then return okay summaries, and I think we're ready to rumble. So I'm reading the configuration from the configuration component. This is actually the one that is going to do the work. So perfect. Let's jump here. Let's return to the configuration folder. So we're ready to execute the Dapr sidecar, Dapr run, and then the application ID. Let's name it config. And Dapr HTTP port, it's going to be 55,000. App dash port is going to be 5500. And then resources path or components path. This is actually the correct name. Resources path, since components path was deprecated. It works nowadays, but it's better to use resources path. So it's in the resources folder, the component that I created. And I think we're ready to execute .NET Run and then URLs and then HTTP port 5500. In this way, I'm setting the port for this application by using the URLs flag. Okay, so I think we're ready to execute this. The sidecar is running. The sidecar is returning a lot of information related to the execution. This is asking me, my Windows operating system is asking me about giving permission to configuration for, using the networking resources. So I clicked on OK, and let's do this. So curl, and then that is curl exe, HTTP, localhost 5500, and then weather forecast, right? And boom, we have it. This is working, right? Of course, that array is being serialized into JSON. So it's returning that array in this way. So what happens if I go back to the portal? Let's return here and navigate to Configuration Explorer, Summaries, Edit, and then, I don't know, really freezing. Really freezing. Apply. So nothing is happening right now, of course, since I need to execute the endpoint again. And we can see the change here, really freezing. And this is fantastic. So I think you can easily see how you can architect your own applications by using the configuration building block. And you can actually switch very easily between environments. Again, I'm using Azure App Configuration because I happen to have that account already in place. But you can also use Redis and PostgreSQL or PostgreSQL. Fantastic. So I've mentioned that we can also subscribe to changes. So if you can see here, Dapr client, and then subscribe configuration. This looks fantastic. So you have to specify the store name, in this case, configuration, and then the different keys that you want to watch for changes. So in this case, I only have one. So summaries is one. And then you should pass some metadata. And this is going to return this subscribe configuration response. So let's do this. Wait. Dapr client subscribe configuration, and then summaries, and I want to know what's going on here. So source is of type iasync enumerable of iDictionary string configuration item. In other words, this allows me to asynchronously obtain the stream of changes from the configuration store. So that said, I don't think this is the best location for implementing this. I mean, the controller itself. Otherwise, the request is going to be blocked because it will try to obtain the asynchronous stream. So I think this is not the correct place for doing this. So let's modify the program. Let's go ahead and stop this. And I think we have different options here. The first one is we can create a background service in ASP.NET Core and then use the Dapr client for subscribing to changes and then asynchronously receive those changes. A background service in this case, right? So in other scenarios, we can also use the lifetime property. I think this is great. Lifetime, and then application started, and then register, and then I pass this lambda expression. And I think let's do this. So we first need to specify scope because I need to inject the Dapr client object here. So let's do this. Bar scope, and this is going to be app services create scope. So this is returning a nice service scope, and I think this includes iDisposable. So Dapr client scope service provider get required service Dapr client. Thank you, Copilot. I think this is it. This is the line that I was looking for. So in other words, I'm obtaining the Dapr client object that was registered by the @Dapr invocation here. So Dapr client. So with those two lines of code, I have access to the Dapr client, and then subscribe configuration and so on. So let's do this. Configuration, and then summaries, and then I think that's it. This is gonna return a subscription response, and I'm using await since I included async here. And I think we can use a await for each. So for each, and then subscription source, subscription for each, for each, what is this? Is that an item in subscription.store? Yes, store. Source, not store, source. So let's do await for each. This is the asynchronous stream reading. And here I can go ahead and see what's going on. Item. I have, what kind of properties I have here? I have keys, I have values. So the first thing that you need to verify is keys. Since the first time that you run your application, this is going to be 0. No changes at all. So you need to verify if keys is 0. So in this case, you just return or report, hey, this is the first time first time, right? Otherwise, you're ready to read those changes by using, I don't know, maybe something similar as the code that Copilot is suggesting, or you just can, I don't know, obtain the item and that's it. So in this case, I'm just gonna console.writeLine and then let's output item as is. No changes at all. I just want to show you the way that you can use to subscribe to updates. So asynchronous stream. I think this is gonna work. And you can also, maybe in the application, you can also use lifetime application stopping. You can also use Dapr client dot unsubscribe configuration if you want to stop those changes from streaming to your application. In this case, I think this is it. This is all. This fantastic. And I'm just reporting here in the console, right? But I think you can also use an iMemory cache interface if you happen to be using memory cache, or you can also use the distributed cache. You know, those caching options in your application for storing locally those changes in the configuration as they happened. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe you want to execute some kind of event because you need to notify your logic that there's a new configuration. So you can easily see this way of thinking, right? By using this subscription option, you have a lot of different ways that you can use to leverage this feature in your application. In this case, I just want to report by using console, and that's it. And in my controller, I'm retrieving the latest configuration setting. So those two different things, okay? Okay, so I think we're ready to rumble. Let's go ahead and run the Dapr sidecar. So this is running. Oh, invalid argument. Failed to subscribe. Summaries from configuration store. Sentinel key is not provided in metadata. So it looks like I need to pass some kind of metadata in my subscription. Sentinel key, I think that's going to be the key that I'm using, which is summaries. So I need to pass the metadata right here. This is an I-read-only dictionary of string. So I can go ahead and, I don't know, dictionary, string, metadata equals new dictionary of string, and then metadata add Sentinel key. Is that the name? Sentinel key. Let me see. Sentinel key. Yes, I think that is the key itself. And its value is going to be summaries. And yes, we can also use this nicer syntax for creating dictionaries. And I'm ready to use the metadata object here. Metadata. Fantastic. So I think this is going to work. Oh, I'm not using Visual Studio itself for running Dapr sidecar. It's not configured. I want to use Dapr run. So this is executing. And yeah, this is working. No errors. And okay, so let's try this. This is returning. Really, really freezing. Right? Oh. but there's no way to reattach the terminal there. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Um, System collection generic dictionary configuration item. It looks like, yes, this is trying to, this is telling me that something happened. Anyway, let's go back here, edit, really freezing. Let's change it back to freezing, apply, and then let's go back here and let's see if this responds accordingly. I think there's something missing in this component. Yeah, because it's not doing anything. It should return something, right? So it's not returning anything right now. And let's see what's going on. Let's go back to the Azure portal. I'm sorry, to the Dapr documentation. And I think, yes, this is the one. Subscribe poll interval. Subscribe poll interval, specify the poll interval. Yes, let's use this one. So let's go back to the configuration.yaml file. In other words, let's return here, notepad, configuration.yaml is right there. And the name is subscribe poll interval. And the value is going to be, so you can see the format. So 24H is 24 hours. So I believe this is valid. 10S, in other words, 10 seconds. Let's see if this works. Save. Let's close this down. Let's return to configuration. And let's fire up the application again by using the Dapr run command. So this is running. Yes, it's running. And let's go back to the Azure App Configuration portal right here in this page, and then edit. Let's change, I don't know, chili, super chili, apply, and let's see if this is reported back to the application somehow. First time, yes, we have this one. But for the thing is that I'm just returning item as a complex object, right? We need to serialize that object into JSON or something, because this is the line that is being executed. So the application works. The subscription works. The thing is that I need to, I don't know, maybe use JSON serializer dot serialize item bar serialized item is going to be this one in serialized item. And let's use, I don't know, serialized item and then serialized item. And let's use the string interpolation format and syntax. And we're ready to rumble again. Let's go back. Dapr run. This is running. Yes, this is reporting the first time. I think I need to use return, right? Because otherwise, this is reporting that there was some change, but there wasn't. The thing is that the first time just reports everything. Anyway, it doesn't matter right now. The thing is that I want to edit again. Let's change super chili back to chili. And let's change cool to super cool. Apply. Let's return. And eventually, we're going to have those changes right here. As you can see here on the screen. Super cool, right? Super cool. This is it. This is the setting that was updated. So as I've mentioned before, you can use this technique of subscribing to configuration changes and updates for doing something, execute some kind of logic in your application. Maybe you want to, I don't know, fire up a new event. Maybe you want to execute a new method. Maybe you want to store that information in a memory cache or in a distributed cache. Or maybe you want to, I don't know, locally you have a database that is being, running in memory or something. So it depends, right? Just like everything else in software, it depends. So cool. So this is fantastic. This is marvelous. And I think that is it. This is the configuration component. Remember that you can also use the endpoint itself by executing v1.0 / configuration and then pass the parameters. But again, I don't think that's real world. That's for demo purposes. If your programming language supports an SDK, in other words, if Dapr supports your programming language, then use the SDK. Use the official SDK that the Dapr team has created for you, right? Just like the one that I'm using here for .NET. Fantastic. Don't use hard-coded strings. Don't use hard-coded configuration settings in your applications. Even if you're not a natural developer, you can also use Redis. You can remember that Redis is running as a container in your machine when you're building Dapr solutions, since that's the one of the default components that is pulled from Docker Hub. So I have Redis here running in this board. In this case, I went to the Azure app configuration path, but you can also use Redis or PostgreSQL or PostgreSQL. It depends on how you pronounce that that word. So this is great. Remember, Dapr in Action is a weekly series about Dapr. This is session 9, and I'm Rodrigo. And I strongly suggest you go back in time and watch the other sessions. And for today, thank you very much for your time, and see you next week.